Welcome to Conversations with Cox and Kielseth, and to be more specific, that is filmmaker Alex Cox and myself, film curator Pablo Kielseth. Alex will join us by phone from his home in Oregon, while I sneak away from my office to call him from one of the projection booths used by the International Film Series, which has been screening foreign and independent movies at CU Boulder since 1941. We will keep our chats to about 20 minutes as we discuss whatever movie-related topics grab our fancy. Thanks for joining us.
Okay, action.
Out here they got a name for rain and wind and fire. The rain is Tess, the fire's Joe, and they call the wind Pearly. Oh, the phone's ringing. Who can that be? Hello?
Alejandro, ¿qué dices?
How are ya? I'm very well, thank you. ¿Y tú?
Yo estoy aquí. Everything's okay in Boulder. So, actually, I'm going to say it's better than okay. We had beautiful weather. It was in the 70s. It was warm. And even better, the skies were so clear. The visibility was just, you could see all, the entire, the mountains were. And after, the recent spate of forest fires, it was so refreshing to just
great.
have such a nice view. Yeah. Hey, we've only got a minute until I'm supposed to call Dan Wool. Do you want to do a quick introduction for Dan Wool?
Yes, Dan Wool is a composer who's done a bunch of my films, a film composer. He also used to be like in bands and stuff. And he had a band called Pray for Rain, which I think started out like a regular band and then became like purely instrumental film music. And so I guess we can talk to him about that. And also he's been doing something pretty interesting lately with Phil Tippett, which has nothing to do with films at all, but is a mega project.
Nice. Is this the Mad God?
No, I mean, that's another project. The Mad God, he's the composer of Mad God, and Richard Beggs is the sound designer, and Mad God is almost finished.
Well, that's you know what? I'm gonna. It's chiming on the hour when he's expecting us to call him, so I'm going to attempt to merge calls with him now. Okay, I think we should all be here now. Are we all here?
I am here.
Ah, I can hear Dan.
All right, we are good to go.
Okay, so
so with that, you guys have met already, though, haven't you? Because Dan, you came out to Boulder, Colorado.
Yes, I remember you. I remember Pablo. I remember you, Alex, from the old days.
Me too. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember everybody. So.
Well, you both have such a long and storied history, and it dates back to Sid and Nancy, or does it go earlier?
No, Repo Man. Dan has a song in Repo Man, or one of Dan's earlier bands has a song in Repo Man.
Yeah, Big Race was the name of that band. We don't want to talk about. Don't ask me questions about that band.
You said we could ask you questions about anything.
Oh yeah, that's right.
I'm very interested in the Big Race.
No, anything is fine. I'm just kidding. You can ask me about that or whatever you want.
Did I ever tell you this? This is a funny story. I had because we had access to the Universal Archive, or the MCA back catalogue, because Universal were the distributor, and at the time they were owned by the record company MCA. And so I had been planning to include that song, The Eve of Destruction. Do you remember that song?
Yeah, I do.
Yep.
It was the first song I ever learned on the guitar.
Really?
Yeah.
And I was trying to figure out somewhere to put it, and the only place I could think to put it was over the bus when the bus pulls up. It was like full of foreboding and all the, there's going to be an atomic bomb go off at the end of the film. But then I thought, but wait, Happy Animals is much more like what is actually going on in the scene. And rather
there you go.
Yeah, so rather than layer it with doom, which it never turned out to be about doom anyway, it actually was kind of better. The music actually improved the scene.
I would like to think so. People, I do get emails about it still, weirdly. Not as many as I get about from Sid and Nancy, but occasionally I will get, like, somehow somebody's dug through and put it together and somehow figured out that I was there and that was me. And so.
And Sid and Nancy was like the most sampled track for other people's temporary music, as I recall.
Oh, for me?
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
There was that one song in Sid and Nancy which went ding, ding, ding-a-dee, ding. And that was like always turning up in other people's temporary tracks.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I mean, are we doing the podcast yet? Anyway, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, we're recording. No, we're speaking. We're live, even as we speak. We're like,
yeah, because I would do. I don't want to, spoil it for the spontaneity, but I would, show. People would send me films that they wanted me to score, and they would have that track in there, and then I have to do sort of a newer version that was like that but different.
Ding, 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 ding.
Yeah, and so it's actually it's much harder to steal from yourself. Weirdly, it's not nearly as much fun. It's actually more. You actually learn something if you kind of do a sound like of somebody else's, composition than my own. I know what that guy was thinking. So,
yeah. Dan, if I could just jump in real quick, because you've worked on it looks like almost 50 movies, and just for people who are out there, what is the elemental difference between a score and a soundtrack?
Well, I mean, soundtrack is more of a generic term that includes all the sound, depending on who you're talking to. I mean, if we're talking about a soundtrack record, those are generally the score and the soundtrack record are one and the same. But in the industry, when we're talking about soundtracks, I mean, the sound designer is also creating a soundtrack. So it's the overall, all the sound is considered the soundtrack. But so it just becomes semantic at a certain point. If you're talking about the score or a soundtrack record, the soundtrack record is the score. And if you're talking about the soundtrack,
it might have some little bits of dialogue and effects thrown in, like you did.
It could, but usually when they refer to a soundtrack record, it's about the score. But in the industry, if you're talking about the film and the soundtrack and the sound, I mean, Richard Beggs, sound designer, who I work with a lot. That's what he always talks about. The sound that soundtrack was good, and he's not talking about the score. He's talking about the sound. The entire whoever mixed the entire project.
Got it.
So
yeah.
So yeah, for soundtrack buffs and for score buffs, the term soundtrack generally is referring to a record or and then in the industry, soundtrack could mean that or the sound effects and everything or whatever.
Right. And also, really quick, a question that I have is, did you by any chance catch that interview that Brian Eno did in the New York Times recently?
No, somebody sent me the link, and now I'm regretting not having remembered to listen.
Well, very quickly, there's a moment where he basically talks about how when he's working on movies, that he actually avoids watching the movies while scoring them because he actually doesn't want to manipulate the viewer in any way. He wants to just kind of create more of a general feel or a vibe. And I was curious how you work with movies.
No, that's a very interesting idea. I mean, the idea that it's like so he's just adding his own thing based on the concept of the film.
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
like Tangerine Dream with Sorcerer.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure how that process worked. I'm not sure.
They never saw the film? I guess maybe they read the script, but they never saw the film.
Right. Yeah, and that happens where people will just find things like that. But I did not know that, or I've forgotten that the Tangerine Dream, there are other. It's not unprecedented, but generally, yeah. If you're coming to Brian Eno, he's Brian Eno, so whatever he sends over is good.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, and so, I generally work. I mean, with Alex, we've gone both ways. I mean, I've written stuff. I mean, Sid Nancy is like I wrote everything for Sid Nancy without seeing picture, from reading the script, basically.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
And then Alex and the editor.
Straight to Hell, the same.
Straight to Hell was the same. I think we wrote some afterward, but yeah, you're right. Most of the big cues, the big musical numbers, or the big cues were written just from the script, and just and that was a little. We were plugging in the sort of the ghost of Morricone into the score, and so that was a little easier. Whereas Sid Nancy, yeah, that was a weird sort of creative like sort of meshing of very different. You know, I would not have ever put this music where it shows up. It's not where I had intended it to go, and so you guys kind of like
around a lot. Especially the Chinese choppers, the Chinese restaurant music, which ended up on the helicopter scene.
Yeah, so it did end up sort of being like sort of the Brian Eno approach, where I just sort of wrote music in the vibe of the script and of the film, and then it didn't go in the scenes it intended, but it did, you know, as we can now say, it seems to encompass the feeling of the film, but just not exactly how I had pictured it. But yeah, my experience from reading scripts, other than that, generally scripts don't help me when I'm composing at all. You can kind of get a vibe from things, but you know, the music from reading a scene and then composing that, it's never really worked. But it has worked, like I say, like for Sid and Nancy, where it's just in the general vibe you can get, but that's about it. So
yeah, good. All right. So one other question I have, and I'm just curious how you would respond to this. A neighbor recently told me that they had a theory that art is how we decorate physical space, and music is how we decorate our mental space, or just time. So, you know, music is a art for time. Does that strike you as something that would be, you know, true?
Yeah, I like that. It's this linear based, you know, time-based medium that is more decorative, especially, I mean, not so much in film. It has a very specific role in film often, but in our lives, it is something that it is art that is sort of, it can kind of go by, and you can tap into it if you want to listen to it really carefully, or you can just let it float by. So yeah, I would consider it decorative in a lot of ways. I mean, if you're dancing to it, or, you know, because I've done a lot of film, dance score for contemporary dance, and depending on the dance piece, it could go either way. Sometimes it's very decorative, and the dancers, you know, what I learned early on doing composing for contemporary dance, they're not dancing to the music. It is more of, you know, kind of what the Eno vibe of, you're part of this piece, and it's just one of the elements. And so in contemporary dance, people, you know, if you stopped the music, they don't stop. And it was that was a revelation to me when I figured that out. They're happy to not have any music. It doesn't matter. And so it has become this sort of like decorative thing, you know, for contemporary dance. And in film, it can be that in film. It can often just sort of be filling space and just sort of like creating something, just something backgroundy. But then often it has a very pivotal role. So it just depends on the.
And it's very specific to the films, to the extent that the editor will move a cut in order to hit a beat, or you will design a beat to hit a cut.
Yeah. Or vice versa. Or like sometimes, you know, like I've had editors say, you know, I really don't like these edits. I'm not really happy with the edit. So if you could just ignore them, you know, the idea is to sometimes to smooth over edits. So it has various specific roles that you will be asked to try to do. So
I'm going to jump in with just this random aside, and I'm curious how it gets received. But my boss, the chair of the Department of Cinema Studies and Moving Image Arts at CU Boulder, Ernesto Acevedo Munoz. Yes, he is currently teaching a class on musicals. And he actually wanted to use Munzinger this last Saturday so that his class could see one of the films on the big screen. And that film was Footloose from 1984. Now, I had never, this will strike people maybe a little odd, but I'd actually never seen Footloose in my life.
Nor have
I don't think I have either. We shouldn't talk about it.
None of us have. Why would we?
I mean, I might have. I mean, I know the gist of it. It's sort of like I know the plot. I know everything about it, but right. I'm not sure I ever. I think I was an adult enough at the time to know that wasn't something.
No, it was not my. Yeah, it was not my cup of tea, but I figured I was starving for the big screen experience. I missed watching movies in Munzinger, where I normally program the international film series. So I went and I saw Footloose, and it blew my mind because it is the same year as Repo Man, and it is so dated. It is so like it is like I felt like they were different universes, but at the same time, what was fascinating to me was that I knew that Footloose was a giant, a box office smash, and it reminded me of another Reagan era box office smash, Top Gun, and they both had one thing that was very much in common. There was this homoerotic subtext, and I couldn't help but wonder what is up with Reagan era cinema, and if you haven't seen Footloose, I guess I'm barking up the wrong tree here, but I just feel that there's something going on that somehow relates almost to Leni Riefenstahl and Triumph of the Will and this fetishism of this like fit superhero body in when you're dealing with a certain kind of mentality.
But isn't
anyway,
all the isn't Marvel Comics the same stuff? I mean, all the superheroes in the jock straps and the women with enormous muscles and stuff, isn't that the same weird Nazi body consciousness? Yeah,
I think there's this a book that gets tossed around a lot by film geeks. It's from Hitler to Caligari. Or from Caligari to Hitler. It's Krakow 1947, and I feel that someone else should be writing the next version.
Yeah, I mean,
of that.
It's easy to look now, like look at all these weird things. Yeah, in the 50s, I don't think everybody was aware of how weird and how overtly, all these like monster movies or science fiction movies. It was like, I don't think people were quite aware that they were directly about the Cold War. But it's easy now to see that they were, and certain people, of course, were aware of it. But for the most part, there's so much stuff that goes on that gets reflected in films that aren't directly responsible. They're just in the sort of cosmic unconsciousness.
Yeah, the zeitgeist. Yeah.
Hey, I wanted also to ask you. This is kind of before I ask you the ultimate question that I've got for you. What are you doing now? Because I know it's kind of bizarre and unusual. But first of all, I wanted to talk about your acting roles in two of my films, in Sid and Nancy and in The Winner. Could you briefly mention your characters in those two films?
Oh yeah, I forgot about The Winner. Well, with Sid and Nancy, I was Sid's guitarist. Did I have a name?
You were Mick Jones from The Clash.
Well, I think that I was I think that the script was written with that because I think Mick Jones did play with Sid's band, and so therefore I kind of might have been that character somehow. But I don't think anybody called my name, and I think I'm just guitarist.
On IMDb, you're listed as Dan Wool with the words rearranged so that they're not,
yeah, that's an 80s-ism, because I was just trying to be cool and weird and kind of angular, and like I was just trying to, yeah. And as this person in the 2000s or 20s, I don't know what I was thinking, but it was just, I liked the 3 and the 3, and it was just kind of like a rock and roll pretentious thing.
Gotcha.
So and for residuals, it actually proved to be kind of complicated because when I get a check for that guy, the bank, I have to tell them the story at the bank, and sometimes they get it, and other times I've just had to I don't know what I do, but it was.
Yeah. What about The Winner?
And then The Winner, I think same role. I think I was just a keyboard player in the character Rebecca De Mornay.
Rebecca De Mornay. Her character had a lounge band, and I was in that in her backup band in that film. And the story is that then there was a big kerfuffle on the set because the person doing my hair made my hair really high, and it was like a Las Vegas high. A huge pompadour. You had the biggest pompadour.
Well, I did initially, and then Frank Whaley, the one of the real actors in the film, who one of the leading actors of the film, had like a actor hissy fit about my hair being bigger, and I still am not completely sure if he was serious or what, but it was like it created tension, and it was like all of a sudden he was really pissed off that my hair was higher than his.
Well, this was an actor thing, Dan, because you didn't realize this. No one realized this except for me, Frank, and hair and makeup. But he had come to us all at the beginning of the film and said he wanted to have the biggest hair in the film. And no, seriously, including Rebecca's hair. He wanted to have absolutely the biggest hair. And so when the hair lady gave you a bigger pompadour than Frank Whaley, she knew what she was doing.
Oh shit!
And then all hell broke loose when you showed up on the set.
That's so awesome. Yeah, I mean, it actually is weirdly. I like that choice. I think that it is eccentric and crazy, but the idea of like, yeah, I want the biggest hair. I totally get that, and I mean, had I known, I would have insisted. I would have been on his side, but I had no idea. I didn't really want my hair to be silly at all, but. I was just an extra, essentially. So,
all right, now the big question. So what are you and Phil Tippett working on these days, Dan?
Well, me, Phil Tippett, do you assume that your listeners know who that is?
Go ahead, fill them in.
Well, Phil Tippett is like a seminal, old-school special effects director, famous for many films, Steven Spielberg films. He worked on Return of the Jedi and did special effects for Jurassic Park and many other classic films, and has been doing this for a very long time, and has done other projects as well, including a stop-motion feature that he's been working on for a very long time. It's a whole nother story, but called Mad God. And so I've been working on that on and off for it's a stop motion project that sort of fits in between his other work and my other work. Everybody involved is sort of have day jobs as well. So I've been involved for maybe like almost 10 years almost, that we've been chipping away and finishing this feature stop motion film called Mad God, which Phil started in the 90s using 35 millimeter film and using old school stop motion. And then it's still old school stop motion, but it's now done on digital, done digitally. But it's continued on over the years and it should be finished, knocking on wood, early next year sometime. So
nice.
So that is a lot of work that I do. Is that. And then the company.
And it's amazing. However, there's another project too that you fellas have been working on.
Right. So that job, because I did well, I guess, well enough to they do other projects at Tippett Studio. They also do CGI for films, but then they started getting into creating media for theme parks, amusement parks. Yeah, for theme parks, and so far theme parks in China specifically. So I mean, I think the goal is to do theme parks wherever. But so starting in I guess it was maybe 4 years ago, I started doing the sound design as well as the scores for these theme parks in China. So what I've worked on are what they call fly rides, which is basically people sitting in a big dome, surrounded all around, like a surround images of visual media, and then a surround soundscape as well as score. So
yeah, because I remember talking to Phil Tippett about this, and one of the things that really blew me away was how they had to they're sort of celebrating certain cities in China, and I don't know if this is exactly the same project you're working on, but I mean, this is
that's it.
But they're celebrating these cities, but in reality they're so polluted that they're not able to actually use footage from the airscapes, or if that's a word, and so they actually have to take shots of other blue skies to superimpose them, and then that's part of the theme park. So you got these people who live in these polluted cities who are ideally going to be going into a theme park to then check out an idealized version of they're a city without pollution in part, and along with a lot of other things. And to me, it's very strange, but at the same time, maybe it's a way of letting, or educating people as to, like, the possibilities of what to work toward as opposed to what to tolerate. But we'll see. Yeah,
I would think that it's more about just, they do have a certain tinge of propaganda. They do, and so it's just more like, this is, I think it's more of like just sort of denial of reality than it is about I don't think it's aspirational in that way. I mean, it could be, who knows.
But you wouldn't go to a theme. You wouldn't go to a theme park. You wouldn't go to Magic Mountain for reality, to like, to go right. To just like, hey, this is Burger King. You can stand in line and get a hamburger.
They're idolized, and in fact, they kind of have this weird thing with time. In the last one we did, it goes back in time, and there's dinosaurs, so there's all kinds of weird, and a lot of them go ancient. So the idea of,
and there's a Mars one, and there's a different one that's a Mars one, right, where they go to Mars.
Yeah, and then the one I'm working on now currently is based on Mars, and so it's a very different thing. Same sort of thing where I'm doing the sound design and the music, but the theme is Mars. It has nothing to do with China. So whereas I have this massive sort of...
And these are theme parks built like in the center of new cities in China, right? So they have these kind of entertainment zones at the center of these new cities so that people can gravitate towards a Chinese version of Magic Mountain or...
Yeah, I mean they're developed in tangent with apartments and living spaces and everything else. That it's like a city from the ground up, and as a city, you need to have something fun for the folks to do, and so so these theme parks, at least the Chinese theme parks, I'm not so sure about the Mars one. Is a little bit different sort of approach. It's not quite as developer oriented. It seems to be more of a proper theme park, but the ones. The previous ones were very much that. They were part of a development. It was just one of the elements, including shopping. It was like big shopping malls, as well as living, as well as entertainment. So,
am I totally out of line and thinking, like, for some reason I'm getting like a flashback to Deliverance, where it's just like, they're going to flood this zone so that they can build something else, and I don't know. There seems to be this weird element of, like, because they have to actually get rid of a lot of people in order to build these theme parks in the middle of the city.
Oh, I think that's no. Now I think you're letting it. I think it's more like, it's like the shape of things to come. It's like the Chinese, in like 20 years, the Chinese have built an extraordinary high-speed rail network that no one in the world could come close to rivaling, except perhaps the Japanese. And they've built cities from the ground up, with like all of this stuff, and it looks just like a William Cameron Menzies set from a science fiction movie of the 1930s.
Yeah.
So of course, all of our endeavors, whatever they are, whether they're done by communists or capitalists, are built on the bodies of the people that we've destroyed, and the neighborhoods we've crushed, and the animals we've made extinct. But they have done pretty impressively, I think, in building these mega cities, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, they at least they have this really great transportation system that goes to every province in China now. That it's like was built within the last 20 years, which is amazing. We can't build one in California. It's going to take until I'm dead to have the one that they're building now. So,
but you might be able to take a fast rail to Bakersfield if you were lucky, because it's apparently great in Bakersfield.
Yeah. Right, that's true. That's right. That's the newest idea. But even that, I don't think I'm going to be a very old man when I take that. It's going to, it's like 20 years to create that. Yeah. No, the Chinese are very good.
Discount too. They'll get you in your walker. You'll stumble on board, and and then you'll get off at Bakersfield, and the dust bowl will blow past you, and the skeletons lying there on the platform, and then you get back on and you go back to San Francisco.
Yeah, but it would be very convenient and very easy, very time efficient.
It won't take any time at all.
I know, to get to Bakersfield and see the dust and the skeletons.
All right. Well, listen, Dan, I want to thank you for joining us. We try to keep our things down to 20 minutes. We went a little long here, but it's all quality. And actually, maybe if we ever decide to tackle some other soundtrack score related, issues, maybe you'll join us again for a podcast.
Yeah, sure thing. This is my pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
All right. Thank you, Dan. That was really nice. And thank you, Pablo. That was most enjoyable.
Oh, thank you both again. And we'll talk again soon.
Okay,
right,
goodbye.
All right. Ciao.
Bye.
Cut. Okay, that's a wrap.
Thanks again for joining Alex Cox and myself today. I'd like to thank Jason Phelps for handling the audio and Ted Thacker for letting us use the intro to his song, The Ballad of Slim Cessna, for the musical cues that bookend these conversations.